Power shifts in seconds, but what if the person being tested already holds the power? Let us know in the comments section below. Shiela Parton didn't flinch when the red and blue lights flashed in her rearview mirror. She didn't curse. She didn't panic. She didn't reach for her license right away. Instead, she just exhaled, long and slow, and let her fingers rest on the steering wheel of her brand new black Jaguar. Type, leather interior still carrying the faint scent of the dealership showroom. The kind of car that turned heads. The kind of car a cop wouldn't expect to see driven by a black woman wearing locks, bold red lipstick, and a tailored blazer that cost more than most folks' rent. Shiela had been pulled over before. Too many times to count. Sometimes for swerving, sometimes for matching a description, sometimes for nothing at all. But today was different. Today was the day. First day as district attorney for Jefferson County. First black woman to ever hold the seat. First civil rights attorney to cross that line from protest to prosecution. She knew the city wasn't ready for her, and she was ready for that. But this stop? It wasn't part of the plan? She watched in the side mirror as a tall officer emerged from the cruiser. White, broad shoulders, aviators, the type who walked like he was dragging his ego behind him. His hand rested a little too easily on the top of his holster as he approached. Shiela tapped a button on the console and her phone began recording silently, just in case. The officer knocked on the window. 3 taps. Firm. She rolled it down halfway. "Good morning, officer. Something wrong?" His gaze dipped just slightly, just enough to notice the suit, the glossy lips, the skin tone. His jaw ticked. "License and registration," he said, not answering her question. She kept her hands visible. "Of course. Can I ask what this is about?" He didn't blink. "Random check." She reached slowly for the glove box, then her purse. Slid out her license, paperwork, handed it all over. The officer didn't even glance at them right away. He stared instead, too long, like he was trying to figure her out, like she was a riddle written in a language he never learned. "Nice car," he muttered, finally glancing at her ID. "Didn't know lawyers made this kind of money." "Some do," she replied coolly, "especially district attorneys." That one word, district, landed in the space between them like a dropped match. He raised an eyebrow. "That right?" Shiela nodded but said nothing more. Let him stew in the silence. He walked back to his cruiser, papers in hand, slower than he needed to. She could feel the heat crawling up her spine, not from fear, but anger. Measured, controlled, like a wire held tight. In the distance, a man on a bicycle paused to watch. A couple walking their dog slowed. Shiela saw the way eyes shifted, the way the air changed. She'd lived this script before. But this time, she wasn't the supporting character. She was the scene. 10 minutes passed, then 15. Too long for a random check. He was stalling. She knew it, and she knew why. When he returned, his expression had shifted, harder, more performative, as if trying to provoke something. "You have a reason to be in this area?" he asked, eyes flicking toward the downtown skyline just a mile away. "I'm headed to work," she answered, "like most people at 8:45 a.m. Mind stepping out of the vehicle?" Her lips parted slightly. That wasn't standard. Not for a license check. Not unless he was trying to escalate. "Is there a reason, officer?" He smirked. "You got something to hide." "No," she said, "but I do have somewhere important to be." The pause stretched. Then, soft and controlled, she pulled out her phone again, tapped into her contacts, hit one name. A single ring. "Hey, Captain Price. I'm currently being detained on Jefferson and Monroe. By one of yours." The officer's smirk vanished like smoke. "I'll stay on the line," Shiela added calmly. "Don't want any confusion." She ended the call. In less than 3 minutes, another cruiser pulled up behind them, lights flashing. A higher-ranking officer, taller, older, black, stepped out and walked straight to her window. He nodded once. "Miss Parton, apologies. Didn't know it was you." The first officer's face turned gray. "You didn't ask who it was," Shiela replied, her voice even, but the temperature behind it had dropped below freezing. The captain looked at the younger officer. "She's the new DA." The officer looked like he'd been slapped with an open palm. A moment passed. 2. Then the captain said, loud enough for every onlooker nearby to hear, "Welcome to Jefferson County, District Attorney Parton. We're glad to have you." And that's when everything shifted. The bystanders leaned closer. The officer muttered a stammered apology, eyes glued to the pavement. Shiela didn't smile, didn't soften. She just rolled her window back up and drove off. Calm, silent, but her eyes were storming. This wasn't the last time she'd see that officer, and he had no idea just how deep she was about to start digging. The parking garage beneath the Jefferson County Justice Center was a dimly lit cavern that echoed every step Shiela Parton took in her black suede heels. Her stride was sharp, echoing confidence, but behind her poise, her jaw clenched tight. She hated starting her first day like this. Being pulled over wasn't new, but being reminded so early of how easily power tried to erase her presence, that was a punch to the gut. Still, she didn't let it show, not to the officers, not to the bystanders, and certainly not to the man she passed in the hallway who tried not to look surprised as she walked into the office marked District Attorney. She opened the door herself. No assistant, no greeting party, just a new nameplate, a stack of folders, and a single welcome note handwritten by the outgoing DA. "Welcome to the fire," it read. "The seat is still warm. J.R. Templeton." Charming, she thought. The office smelled of fresh paint and new beginnings. Tall windows looked out over the city skyline, a city built on contradictions. Brick courthouses and broken promises. Civil War statues on streets named after black musicians. Justice halls with metal detectors, but blind to the kind of danger that wore a badge and a grin. Shiela dropped her briefcase on the desk and opened the top drawer. Files, memos, and a worn leather planner left behind. Inside it was a tab marked Internal Affairs Confidential. She flipped it open. Photos, case summaries, officer misconduct complaints, many of them with one common thread, the badge number 5120, Officer D. Crawley. Her jaw flexed. It was him. She flipped to a report dated just last month. Use of excessive force, minor injury to civilian. Case closed without disciplinary action. Shiela leaned back in the chair that didn't quite feel like hers yet, not until she decided what to do with files like these, the same files Templeton had likely ignored. She could feel the weight of decisions pressing down already. A knock at the door. She looked up. A young woman with wide glasses and a nervous smile hovered in the doorway. "Miss Parton? Sorry." "D.A. Parton. I'm Tanya, executive assistant. Just wanted to say welcome. And also, the mayor's waiting in the conference room, said it couldn't wait." Shiela stood, smoothing the front of her jacket. "Let's not keep him then." The walk to the conference room was brief, but the stares she collected on the way were not. Some curious, some cold, some just stunned. They weren't expecting her, not really. Let them stare. Inside the room, Mayor Langston stood by the window, arms crossed. Middle-aged, gray at the temples, a man who spent more time in front of cameras than behind a desk. He turned and forced a politician's smile. "Shiela Parton, welcome." He reached out to shake her hand. "Heard there was a little incident this morning." She shook his hand without flinching. "If you mean being profiled and delayed by one of your city's officers, then yes. It was educational." Langston's smile faded slightly. "I hope it won't overshadow your first day. It's already part of it, she replied coolly. But I appreciate the concern. The mayor gestured for her to sit. Look, let's not dance around. You've got a lot of eyes on you. People are expecting big things, and not all of them are happy about it. I'm not here to make people happy, she said. I'm here to do my job. I respect that, he said, but his tone sounded more like a warning than support. That being said, we've got heat on the department. Media's sniffing around. Civil rights watchdogs are circling. The last thing we need is chaos. Shiela tilted her head. What exactly are you asking me to do? I'm asking you to be smart about what you pursue, he said. There are some names in those files I know you've seen. Good people, decorated officers. What I'm saying is, let's not open a can of worms you can't close. Sheila's silence was deliberate, controlled. Langston leaned forward. We're glad to have you, truly, but we need the kind of DA who knows how to play chess, not start fires. She rose to her feet. Then let's hope I'm good at both. Back in her office, she shut the door softly behind her. Tanya had left a stack of internal memos on her desk. One caught her eye. Complaints Review. Department Misconduct. Signed for review. Officer D. Crawley, badge 5120. Signed by Templeton. Status pending reassessment by incoming DA. She circled it in red ink, then circled it again. Later that afternoon, Shiela stood before her staff for their first official briefing under her leadership. Prosecutors, investigators, clerks, some fresh-faced, some jaded, all looking to her. I won't waste your time with pleasantries, she began. This office has been reactive for too long. We're done with damage control. We're done avoiding hard truths. Starting today, we lead from the front. The silence in the room wasn't fear, it was attention. You'll hear things about me, that I'm too idealistic, too bold, that I've got an agenda. She paused. Let me be clear, I do have an agenda. It's called justice. The staff looked around at each other, some exchanging glances. Shiela didn't care. She wasn't here to be liked. She was here to change things. The meeting ended. People filed out slowly, whispering. A few nodded to her. Others didn't. Tanya approached. You've got a visitor waiting in the lobby. Won't give a name, just said it's important. Shiela followed her out. In the waiting area stood a young man in his early 20s, nervous energy in his legs, backpack slung low, eyes darting around the room. Miss Parton, he said, stepping forward. Shiela, she said, her tone softening slightly. I saw what happened this morning, the stop. It's all over TikTok now. Someone filmed it from their window. Her eyes narrowed. That went public? He nodded. Yeah. And the comments are exploding. People are saying you should resign. Others say you're a hero. She exhaled. He dug into his bag and pulled out a thin folder. My brother was arrested last year. Officer Crawley. It didn't make sense then, still doesn't. If you're really looking into him, you should see this. He held the file out to her. Shiela took it. For the first time that day, her hands trembled just slightly. Not from fear, from resolve. Because the storm wasn't coming. She was the storm. The file the young man handed her was worn at the corners, the kind of folder passed through too many hands. Shiela didn't open it in the lobby. She waited until she was back in her office, door closed, blinds drawn, phone silenced. Only then did she sit at her desk and carefully unfold the contents. Inside were handwritten notes, faded police reports, and a USB stick taped to the last page with a label written in blocky, angry print. Proof. She plugged it into her computer. The video loaded grainy and shaky, but clear enough. The timestamp in the corner read 8/14, 9:37 p.m. The screen flickered into a chaotic scene. Flashlights barked orders, a dark alley. Sheila's breath hitched as she watched a young man, barely 20, shoved to the ground by Officer Crawley. No provocation, no resistance. Just a knee in the back, a fist in the ribs, then another and another, all while backup stood by, doing nothing. Shiela leaned in closer, jaw tight. The voice behind the camera whispered, "They said he had a weapon. He don't got nothing." Then came the part that twisted her stomach. Crawley stood up, wiped his hand on his pants, and said to the others, "He's gonna say we roughed him up. Make sure your body cam's glitched again." Laughter followed. The video ended. Shailene sat still for a moment. Her reflection stared back at her from the black monitor, hard and unblinking. She took a breath. Then another. Then reached for her phone. "Jules," she said when the line picked up, "I need to see everything on Officer Darren Crawley. Every complaint, every deposition, and pull me the footage from August 14th. Don't care if it's archived. I want it by the end of the day." Jules, one of her senior investigators, responded without hesitation. "On it." She hung up and stood, crossing to the window. The skyline hadn't changed, but she had. There was no walking back now. That video was a fuse, and the city was the powder keg. That afternoon, Shiela sat across from the Internal Affairs Chief, Roger Milstein, a man with a bald crown and a talent for dodging responsibility. The minute she showed him the footage, his eyes thinned. "Where'd you get this?" he asked, not even pretending to be surprised. "That's not the important question," Shiela replied. "The important question is why this officer still has a badge." Milstein scratched his cheek, feigning concern. "You know how these things go, context, angle, chain of evidence." She cut him off. "Don't insult me with legal gymnastics. That's an assault. You know it, I know it, and if that video leaks, and it will, everyone else will know it too." Milstein shifted uncomfortably. "We've had complaints about Crawley before, yes, but none with this kind of evidence. Body cam footage from that night was corrupted." "I know," Shiela said. "Convenient." "Look," he said, lowering his voice, "Crawley's not perfect, but he's effective. He closes cases. He brings in suspects. His numbers are good." "His numbers," she echoed. "You mean arrests, not convictions, not justice." He leaned back, voice growing colder. "You're new here. You haven't seen what happens when you go after people with influence in this department. This city eats reformers alive." Shiela stood, then let it try. She walked out before he could say another word. Later, in her office, Jules returned with a stack of documents. "You were right. Crawley's history's a mess. 5 complaints in the last 3 years. 2 use-of-force investigations closed with no discipline. Internal review panels filled with guys he trained with. It's a wall of silence." Shiela sifted through the files. All the same patterns. All the same deflections. But one caught her eye. An interview transcript from a woman named Sonia Beltran, mother of a teenager arrested for suspicion of burglary near the West End train stop. Her son Luis had a broken wrist and a black eye by the time they reached booking. Crawley claimed the boy fell. The mother claimed otherwise. The case never went public. Shiela turned to Jules. "Find her, quietly. I want to speak to her myself." That evening, under a canopy of streetlights, Shiela met Sonia in a quiet park near her neighborhood. The woman wore a heavy jacket and clutched her purse like it was armor. Her eyes were tired but watchful. "You sure this won't get him in more trouble?" Sonia asked after hearing Sheila's name. "I can't promise anything," Shiela said honestly. "But I can promise I'll listen, and that I'll do something." Sonia's story poured out in fragments. The fear, the late-night call, the bruises no one wanted to explain, the officers who wouldn't answer her questions, the way her son still jumped at loud sounds. "They said he was casing houses," she whispered. "He was walking home from his friends. He had a bag of chips and a comic book in his pocket. Shiela listened without interrupting, letting the woman speak until her voice wavered and her shoulders shook. "I didn't think anybody cared," Sonia said at last. Shiela looked her in the eye. "I do." That night, back at the office, Shiela opened her laptop. She didn't sleep. She reviewed every complaint tied to Officer Crawley, every name, every report. She laid them out like a puzzle across her office floor. The pieces began to fit. A pattern emerged. Not just force, but location, neighborhood, age, race. He wasn't just aggressive, he was targeted. She drafted a memo to her prosecutorial ethics board. Motion to review and re-examine Officer Darren Crawley's arrest history, use of force incidents, and all open or pending cases where he served as primary arresting officer. The weight of it hit her as she typed. This wouldn't be quiet. It wouldn't be safe. But it would be right. She saved the document. Then stood and looked again at the city outside her window. Same skyline. Same problems. But not the same silence. Not anymore. The day the footage leaked, it wasn't through an official release or press conference. It came from a teenager. The same kid who filmed it. He uploaded it to a private account, tagged 3 local activists, and within hours it was everywhere. By noon, hashtags bearing Officer Crawley's name trended nationwide. By 3 p.m., the mayor had called an emergency press briefing, and by 5:17, Officer Darren Crawley was placed on immediate suspension pending investigation. But none of it happened by accident. Shiela Parton made sure of that. She stood behind the tinted glass of the courthouse conference room as reporters shouted questions into the wind, microphones angled toward the mayor, his face stiff, jaw clenched, eyes betraying his discomfort. He hadn't wanted this, but now the fire was out of his hands. District Attorney Parton will be conducting an independent review of all misconduct cases involving Officer Crawley, he announced, his voice hard with effort. Effective immediately. She will also have full cooperation from Internal Affairs. Shiela didn't flinch at the weight of it. This was more than a press cycle. It was a line drawn in permanent ink. When the cameras left and the building settled back into quiet, she made her way down the marble hallway, each step measured, echoing, certain. In her office, the mood had shifted. Tanya buzzed around on phone calls, Jules paced with new files in hand, and a junior clerk nervously offered coffee. But Shiela's focus was on a message left on her desk. Handwritten, no name. "Thank you, he's scared now, and we're not." Shiela folded the note, slipping it into the back of her leather planner. Then she turned to Jules, who handed her a thick folder. "What's this?" "His record. Everything we dug up. The team's moving fast. The IA board's panicking. But we got what we need." Shiela opened the folder. Each page was a story. A name. A bruise. A silence someone had once accepted. Not anymore. She picked up the phone. "Captain Price, this is D.A. Parton. I'd like Officer Crawley brought in for questioning tomorrow morning. Voluntary for now. We'll see how long that lasts." The line was silent for a moment. Then the captain spoke. Understood. That night, the city lit up in a way Shiela hadn't seen before. Not with celebration, but with awareness. In barbershops and laundromats, diners and stoops, people were talking. Not whispering, but full voice. Not afraid, but aware. Her phone buzzed with messages from fellow DAs across the state, some congratulatory, some cautious. A few thinly veiled warnings disguised as professional courtesy. She answered none of them. Instead, she found herself back at Jefferson Park, sitting on the same bench where she'd spoken to Sonia Beltran days earlier. Only now she wasn't alone. A woman with tight braids and a cane approached. Her son trailed behind her. Luis cast now off, but his eyes still guarded. Shiela smiled as they sat down. "Heard the news," Sonia said softly. Louise spoke next. "You did it." Shiela turned to him. "We did it. You told your story. You kept going. The boy shrugged. Still scared sometimes. That's okay, she said. Courage isn't about never being scared. It's about doing what's right while scared. He looked at her then, really looked, and something shifted in his shoulders. Will he go to jail? He asked. I don't know yet, she said honestly. But he won't hurt anyone else. That much I'll make sure of. Sonia nodded, eyes misty. No one ever believed us before. They do now. The next morning, Officer Darren Crawley walked into the DA's office under escort. No cuffs. No press. Shiela waited in the interrogation room, not behind glass, not behind a desk, but across from him, face to face. No power games, just truth. He sat down, cocky mask still half on, though it cracked around the eyes. You think this ends me? He said. She didn't blink. I think this ends your illusion. He leaned forward. I made a mistake, sure, but those kids? They're criminals. I kept this city clean. You kept it afraid, she replied, but not anymore. She slid a paper across the table. You can resign and cooperate, or face formal charges, your choice. For the first time, his silence held fear. By the end of the week, Crawley had turned in his badge. The official charges followed anyway. Civil suits stacked, DOJ inquiries launched, and every case he'd touched was reopened under an independent review. It wasn't just justice, it was accountability, and it rolled out like thunder. Weeks passed. Shiela stood on the stage of a packed city auditorium, her first major address as district attorney. She didn't speak in legal jargon or political rhythms. She spoke like a woman who had waited her whole life for the mic. Justice isn't blind, she said. It sees everything we let it see, and for too long we taught it to look away when the harm did wear a suit. That ends now. Applause thundered. Camera flashes sparked. And somewhere in the crowd, that same teenager, Luis, stood clapping, a little taller. Later that night, back in her office, Shiela sat alone. The city outside pulsed with life. Tanya had left her a cupcake on the desk with a sticky note. For the DA who shook the system. She smiled, but not because she had won. She smiled because she wasn't done. This wasn't the end. It was only the beginning. And this time, the truth had teeth.